All right, my friends, welcome back to another episode of the Build Show podcast. That's right, my weekly time to get together with you guys and go deep. This is part 2. I got my man Jordan Smith back. If you missed the previous episode, go back and watch it so you can kind of understand Jordan's history a bit.
And also explain why I'm wearing such a small shirt.
Which you can watch this on thebuildshow.com to see this tiny shirt that he's in, this medium. But today, I want to talk to Jordan about a really important topic, which is how do we build a really good home, but not on a crazy Matt Reisinger budget, right? How do we build high performance on a budget? And Jordan's made a whole series of videos on this topic, so we're going to try and narrow them down to the things we need to know in 30 minutes. But if you've been around Jordan and I together, you may or may not have. We go way back. And I love having Jordan back on the Build Show. He's now a Build Show Network contributor. And he and I together hosted a ton of different videos, conferences, spoke together. It's just super easy to hang out with Jordan. And he's both really smart and not nearly as handsome as me.
That's true.
So it's perfect to hang out with him.
That's exactly why you keep me around.
From the Reisinger Build Studios in Austin, Texas. Let's get going. Hey, before we jump in with Jordan, I want to say a big thanks to our 2 sponsors. First off, Santa Fe. This is a dehumidifier company. It's part of a bigger company. You may have seen other brands with them over the years, but Santa Fe is their main horse that us residential builders would know. Jordan, have you put any Santa Fe's in before?
Absolutely. They're our default dehumidifier.
Same with us. We put one in every project. Although these days, Jordan, I would tell you, we're typically speccing 2 in every project because dehumidification is super, super important. And it's not just for the hot and humid South. You know, Jordan and I build here in Austin, Texas. And if you're in Texas, it's a no-brainer. You should have dehu in every build. But even if you're in a northern climate, like in Boston, I visited a Steve Basic build recently where the builder has a Santa Fe in Boston too. They have these times of the year where it's crazy humid out. And don't forget, when you build a high-performance house, a really tight house, you're not dealing with that humidity typically very well with maybe that cold, low humidity air coming in from infiltration. So if you've got a couple kids, a dog, an indoor pool, who knows what you've got going on in your house, your indoor humidity levels can rise. And a Santa Fe is a really, really good unit made in Wisconsin with some really good people. I'm super thankful for my partnership with Santa Fe over
when
the
we
years.
start talking a little bit later in the episode about the affordable high performance, the addition of a ventilation option on their units might be a solution to give you both dehumidification and ventilation in a single package. And for the houses you build, it's like, well, why would you have one piece of equipment do 2 jobs instead of 2 pieces of equipment doing 2 jobs? And I agree in principle, but when you really are looking at like, how can we cut
How do we afford this?
every dollar out of this, the ventilation option's a big...
Put a ventilated Santa Fe dehuman that has 2 return pipes, one for dedicated fresh air and one for the return for the house. You can learn more on their website, but great people, Santa Fe dehumidifiers. Next up, Pella windows and doors. I found out in the previous episode, Jordan actually has Pella in his own personal build.
I've got the impervious.
So you have a whole house full of impervious?
I've got a whole house full.
Very cool.
Yeah.
We used Impervia on the Reisinger build in just the wet areas. Yeah. And then we did Lifestyles, which is their wood clad product. And Jordan, I'm curious what you know, typically over the years we've said, go with as many casements as possible because casements close really tight, regardless of manufacturer. What'd you do in your house?
They're either all fixed or casement. If I had to do it all over again, I'd probably do the same thing. I've started leaning more and more towards just putting operable windows where I need egress. Yeah. Because especially in high performance builds, people just don't open their windows. They think they will.
They never do.
But they never do. And so you get even better ceiling. You get great ceiling on the casement, but you get even better on the fixed. Yeah. Especially over time.
And it's less money.
And it's less money, right? And so you can start dropping a lot of those expenses out and get a great looking, great performing window that just doesn't open.
Yeah, that's great. Well, that's what we did in the Reisinger build. I did a combination of fixed and casements, but I did a type of casement that I'm really big on these days. which is a push-out casement.
Oh, yeah.
And frankly, that was one of the first jobs that I was able to get that push-out casement spec everywhere. So the whole house, except for maybe one or two windows that have traditional crank casements, has these push-out casements. And Jordan, I said this on the last podcast episode when I was talking about Pella, but I was blown away by my blower door score. Pre-mechanicals, I think it was like 0.40 ACH 50.
Yeah.
Those push-out casements were super tight. They sealed really, really well. And the other thing that I was really happy with was both swing doors from Pella are the multi-point lock that has the pop the handle up to close, which means it's getting really good seals. And my slider in that house is like a 5.0, 10.0, or no, the other way around. What is it? It's 10 foot wide and with two 5-foot panels. What would I call that? I'm blanking on my nomenclature. It's basically an XO, one operable, one fixed, and the fixed and operable with 5-foot wide panels.
Big panel.
Big slider, but that thing is tight, dude.
Yeah.
I like it. And as a general note, I got to say, typically window companies that are based in a horrible part of the world when it comes to weather tend to have products that seal really well. And I'm not trying to disparage anybody, but when that's not the case, that sometimes is not the case.
Yeah.
Pellas were really, really tight. And that low blower door score for just a off-the-shelf lifestyle series, I didn't tell them I wanted Passive House certified or some other wonky spec. To get that kind of number, I was super happy. So thank you, Pella, for making some great products right in the heart of America. All right, Jordan. Affordable, high performance. You've got a whole series on this. There's probably a 4-hour conversation we could have.
Yeah.
But in your mind, are there a couple keys to building a high performance house?
Don't build your house so damn big. Make your house smaller, right?
That's a great number one.
The way I think about it is you've only got so many knobs when you're trying to create a house and make it less expensive. When I say affordable too, it's important to know I'm trying to build a high performance house for the same price as a production home in the same neighborhood would cost. So we're not trying to get to Habitat for Humanity levels of like just completely austere. And
this is like top 10 national builder pricing.
Exactly right. If we can build for what one of the big guys are building down the road for, then we've hit that. And there's no free lunch, right? You are not going to build a cheaper home per square foot than the big guys.
Right.
There's, just to step a little bit back from that, but homeowners and production builders have completely different goals when a house is being built. A homeowner wants something that is comfortable and durable and beautiful and functional. All of these lists. A builder wants it to be less expensive, more square footage, and easy to build, right? Because all of that is cheaper, and the square footage, building it bigger, is the easiest way to increase the sales price on that. Because the earliest example of this that I can find is in the Bible, where I think it's Sarah and Abraham. So Sarah dies, and Abraham goes to the people that he's staying with, and he's like, hey, my wife just died, I need to bury her. And the guy's like, oh, you can have my field and bury her there. He's like, well, let me pay you some money for it. And the other guy's like, no, just take it. He's like, no, let me pay you some money. He's like, no. They go back and forth for a while. And finally, the guy who's selling the field's like, well, my neighbor's land, which is the same size, just sold for this much. And Abraham said, I'll pay you the same price. And that's the earliest thing that I can find where people think size means, an acre is an acre. And that's true in land. It is not true in homes. If it were true in homes, then it would be true in cars. And if it were true in cars, nobody would buy a Ferrari. They'd be buying a bus.
Yeah, totally.
Because price per square foot, if you're spending
Buses
$1 million,
are way cheaper.
Yeah, per square foot.
Conversion vans, baby. That's where it's at.
So anyway, all that rant to say, that's what we say. We want to build a comparable home price-wise, but make it way better performance-wise and function-wise, and size ain't it.
Yep.
And so that's the first big knob. And then the second knob that you can turn is the complexity of the design. So the design is so critical. We talked a little bit about the last in the last podcast. We talked a little bit about Smith House being a design build company, and the reason that I get really excited about that portion of it is because so much of the performance of the home, and I'm not talking about just the blower door test and the energy modeling and all that. I'm talking about the performance of the house. Like when you wake up in the morning, you go out and get coffee. Do you feel good? Like, is this a house that inspires you to live your best life? To use a anyway. So I also am selling a book, by the way. It's a
follow-up from Rick Warren's popular book.
Yeah. Does it make you want to? Does it inspire you to live a good life? Right. So that's that. Performance, and that only can happen in the design. The details of how you're doing the air sealing can only be taken care of in the design.
Yeah, that's
the details
totally true.
of where the sun's coming up and where the sun's going down and where's your views and where's the neighbors that you might not want to be looking directly at. Like, well, how does all of this play together? And that's that design knob. And you can make something very, very complex and very, very expensive. That doesn't necessarily mean it means it will live better.
And I'm probably taking you further down the road than we want to go right this second, but I was thinking in my head, but also, like, if you build a complex house, it's really hard to monopoly frame that.
Yeah.
Right. So if I build a less complex house, which my house is pretty basic, box form in a lot of ways, but allowed me to build a monopoly framed house at a pretty basic level. It was pretty straightforward to build, and it was also easy for me as a non-architect to kind of picture how I was going to build it, how I was going to make those air sealing details. I didn't have 37 pages of details to think through these million intersections and all this complication. And the more complicated, the more chance for us to trip and fall on our faces too.
Yep. And then the third knob is finishes. Finishes, and I sort of throw in windows in that, although that's more design. I don't know where they go. Windows and doors, fenestrations are really expensive, right?
Yeah, it can be.
But those finishes are important. And what tends to happen is when people say, I want to build an affordable house, for whatever reason, size is rarely considered. Very few people that I talk to say, I want to build a small house. And if they do, like, we want to build something small, like 3,500 square
You're
foot.
like, what? That's not small.
Like, if you look at how we were building houses in the 70s and the number of people in the houses in the 70s compared to today, we've got more than double square footage per person. It's crazy.
You don't need all that space.
Need all the space.
That's such a waste.
And this is where, and I won't rant about this, or I will, but maybe not in this podcast. Barndominiums, right? That's where the barndominium falls. It's like, we want to build it as big as possible and as cheaply as possible, right? So they crank up the knob for size, and they turn down the knob on good design, and they also turn down the knob on good materials and products, right?
Right. Totally.
And then the middle one, design, it's a hard one, and this is where we're excited about the design build portion of it, because we sort of bait and switch. People call us wanting somebody to build them a house, and they don't have a design, and we're like, well, you need to design a house, and here's our design fees. And they're like, oh, I guess we do need to design a house. And so we don't really give them or if they say, we have this architect that we love working with, it's like, great, we love working, like, architects are like, we're not trying to cut anybody out.
Right.
We're just trying to say, getting a house plan off of a magazine is not going to get you what you want. And so that design portion is super important. And then, and very rarely thought of when people are looking at house plans. And then finally, it's materials. When people start, they've cranked up the size, they've skipped on the design, so they're setting themselves up for failure. And then they look at the materials and they're like, oh, well, we want the cheap stuff. We want to do it as cheaply as possible. And then the fourth knob that I haven't mentioned is labor, right? Those two knobs for some reason, people think they're one knob, but they're really two knobs, right? So people say, I want to use a cheaper product, which honestly, there's a lot of really good products that sell for half price of a really good exotic European product. If we're thinking just like weather barriers, you can think of a handful of, like, on the low end, there's products that work great. It's a great material, tricky to install. Details are, but it's a good material. And then for 2X, 3X, you can get up to the just bulletproof stuff. But does that really matter over a 50-year, maybe even 100-year if you install it right?
Right.
It's debatable.
I'll take install right any day over.
But
I'll take good labor any day over better materials with cheaper labor.
If you install,
that's such a hard one to explain.
If you install any of these products, from the super expensive exotic stuff to the cheap stuff, if you install it poorly, none of it's going to work.
I got a great example for you on that, on pocket doors.
Yeah.
between cheap pocket door hardware, the track hardware, and the hardware that pulls it, there's such a big difference in the bottom to the top, and even in the middle, there's a big difference. But the guy installing it makes all the difference in the world. If you put in the really top of the line hardware, and you have a guy who's not a really good finish carpenter, who's not, a expensive per hour guy, you can mess up a pocket door, and it is really darn expensive to come later and fix it. Yeah. So if you're going to dial the labor and materials on pocket doors, don't ever dial back the labor side.
Absolutely. And that's, we work cost plus. And that helps us because we're able to just show the client, like, here's what we're paying for what. So there's no temptation to hide, like, oh, we're going to get the cheaper guy.
Right,
because if it's all cost plus and we're all looking at the same numbers together, we can have that conversation like, look, if I get Gio to come out here and paint this, he'll be in, he'll be out, and it will be done.
It'll be fabulous.
And it'll be fabulous.
Yeah.
And he's going to cost, $8,000 more than the next guy, but it's going to be so much more of a pain for all of us, and you'll end up spending that much more money on the back end. It's an easier conversation.
By the way, don't you feel like your clients know, quote unquote, air quotes, know how much paint should cost, and that's too much? You're always like, what are you talking? You have no idea how much it costs to paint a new house. Yeah, why are you even commenting on this number?
So Gio just, y'all don't know him, but Gio is, I met him
longtime friend of ours.
Yeah, when I was working with Matt, and Gio's fantastic.
He's awesome.
We use him on our projects. And he called me the other day, just businessman to businessman. He's like, hey, I'm getting some pushback on this house. They say it's too expensive. And he's like, let me run you through my numbers. And so we had a 20-minute talk where he's running through and I'm taking notes.
I love that he called you. That's so great.
And then we get to the bottom. He's like, and this is what I'm charging. And I was like, bro, I don't think you're charging enough.
That's too light.
I don't think your margin's like, you basically have paid your workers and you've paid yourself.
And that's it.
And that's it.
Yeah.
That's not a business. That's a job.
Yeah, you own your own job.
You have the stress of keeping all these other people employed, and you're in benefit. Like, just go work for a painter. Like, either raise your. So yeah,
he needs to read the E-Myth. Did you ever read that book?
I have read
Michael
the E-Myth.
Gerber.
Yeah.
He owns his own job.
Yeah,
you said it.
Exactly. That's where I got it from.
Yeah.
I still love my stuff.
That's so awesome.
So yeah, that's the labor portion of it is critical.
By the way, don't call Gio if you're listening. He's not available for your jobs.
Yeah, no. Yeah,
He only works with Jordan and I.
Gio, I don't mean Gio. I mean
no, we're not
Robert.
We're not telling you any more information about him. Don't text us. We won't give you his contact.
He's terrible.
You don't want to call him.
He's going up on his prices too.
He's unavailable.
I heard. I don't know. So yeah, the labor side, like when people are trying to save money, they turn down materials number one, labor number two, or maybe those are all the same. They turn up the size to make it as big as possible, and then design is just not even thought about.
Yep.
And you wind up with the barndominium. I mean, and there's good. I mean, I'm not just pooping on. I'm not pooping on all barndominiums. If you have a barndominium, call Matt 512. No,
I just built one.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah.
I saw that. It was good looking. It was a good. But it wasn't. The idea behind that was not. We're trying to build it as cheaply as possible per square foot.
It was a well-built, expensive home.
Exactly. So, in the affordable high performance experiment, I sat down and I thought, could we build a high performance home? Like one of the comments that I always get on my social media channels as I'm showing, my projects, which are like, $1 million, $3 million homes, not to mention your projects, which, range $10 million plus. It's like, well, if I had that kind of money, I would build that type of house too. And I'm like, well, yeah, but you don't have to have that kind of money to build a really nice house.
No.
And so this first series that's launched on my YouTube channel now is talking specifically about that. Like, how can we design and build a house that is beautiful, resilient, functional, comfortable, energy efficient, all of the things with high performance, and do it for an affordable price.
Yep.
And it wasn't hard. I mean, it was hard. Like, the devil's in the details, right? There's a million things. We don't have enough time in this podcast to go through all of the details. There's a million things you have to do right, but it's also not really that hard.
Yeah.
You just have to know what you're doing and then execute those details well.
We don't need to get into all those details, but I'm hoping, Jordan, that this podcast whets people's appetite to go see you on thebuildshow.com. Jordan, by the time this launches, will be on the Build Show. If you go to thebuildshow.com, hit that hamburger menu. That's the 3 lines at the top. They, for whatever reason, the web guys call it a hamburger menu, and now I call it that too. I heard it once in a meeting. Hit the hamburger menu, hit build experts. You'll see Jordan Smith. Everybody's listed alphabetically. It sounds just, his name's spelled just like it sounds. Hit Jordan Smith. You can see his bio video, and you're going to see a bunch of these videos where Jordan's talking about design build, high performance, details. Jordan's a fabulous teacher and a great, really building science expert. And I love that you've taken your years of knowledge and brought that to an affordable component too, or the term I tend to use these days is attainable.
Yeah.
Right. Because frankly, a Deere Horton or a Pulte isn't always affordable either.
Yeah.
But they are more
This
attainable.
first one that we're doing, the comps in the area were Mr. Horton, and they were $500,000 homes.
There you go.
So it wasn't like this wasn't a $100,000. It was a $500,000 home.
That's awesome.
But it's nice.
Yeah.
And her first energy bill came in. She called me and she's like, my electrical bill came in. I was like, what was it? She's like, $37.
Oh my god.
I mean, it might have been a good part of the year too, but still, exterior insulation and air tightness, it adds up.
That's a really big deal.
Yeah.
And to think that house could be around for a couple hundred years too. I'd like to challenge any of the production builders to say that their houses will last a couple hundred years. And I'm not basing that on you and I saying that. I'm basing that on Joe Stiebrick, who's kind of the godfather of building science. He wrote an article in 2008-9, I forget what it was, called The Perfect Wall. If you just Google The Perfect Wall, that's an article that Jordan and I read more than a decade ago. I probably read it maybe almost 2 decades ago. Had to think about it, had to read books about it, had to go hear Joe speak about it. And we've built together several houses with that concept. And so we're just piggybacking on what Joe says. And in that original article, he says something to the effect of, what if I told you I could build a house that would last 500 years?
Yeah.
And that was really intriguing for me because, as Americans, we don't think of, there's not many houses in America, there aren't any houses in America that are 500 years old, right? Where were we? In the 1500s, we had Native American Indians that didn't build wood houses, right? Our first log cabin was probably 16 or 1700s-ish. But if you go to Japan, you can see 1,000-year-old plus wood structures. I think even older than that, if I remember correctly. I've only been to Japan once.
Yeah. Well, Switzerland, when we went to Switzerland. Those barns, they're barns. They're not even houses.
I forgot we went to Switzerland
they're
together.
Barns. And they were, 600, 700, 800 years old, something like that.
And they were wood.
And they're wood. They're all wood. Yeah.
And so you can build a very durable structure out of wood, and it can last a long time.
You forgot I went to Switzerland.
I forgot about it, dude. We made such cool videos in freaking Switzerland.
Daily. Not only do I text you every day, but I also write daily in my diary. It's like, remember that time that Matt and I and Joey were in Switzerland? It's great. It's great. I'll have to show you sometime.
Sega in like 2016 or 17 or 18,
something like that,
paid for Jordan and I and Joey to go to Switzerland and kind of see Swiss construction. And we went to Kung Holzbau.
Yeah.
Do you remember that factory? Yeah. Which had to have been one of the coolest they were building their new office. And to this day, I would probably tell you that's one of the most beautiful buildings I've ever been in.
Absolutely.
That, oh, by the way, is basically built perfect wall style. Yeah. And has no insulation in the building because they use wood for insulation.
They use wooden nails.
Do you remember how thick the wood? Yeah, you got to explain that, by the way. You threw that out like everyone knows what you're talking about.
You were talking about modular homes, right? So that was one of the things. They were making these wall panels on an assembly line, cutting basically 2x4s and then nailing them in sort of a CLT type cross-laminated pattern.
Like a 45-degree angle.
But instead of gluing them, or maybe in addition, I can't remember. I think it was instead of
I think it was instead.
Yeah. They're shooting, what was it? It was a hard maple or
something.
Some sort of
red
a wood.
Oak, I don't know.
Yeah, a wood fastener.
Like a Dracula spike.
Yeah, through the soft larch with a pneumatic nailer on a robotic arm. And then, they would, the thickness, they said with wood insulation. That was the first time I'd ever seen anything with wood insulation.
Me too.
With wood insulation, it was something like an 8-inch wall section. And then without, it was like a 12 inches or
something like that.
I forget. It's a massive wall, though.
But basically, kind of think of plywood that's grand, like 1-inch plies for plywood and like a 10-inch thick wall. And that was the exterior on this 3 or 4 story, like low rise commercial building. And not only that, all the insides were also solid wood too. They had this floor system on that house. You remember that floor?
So
I still to this day can picture the thumbnail on that video with me standing in that room where the ceiling is the floor structure and they had just a flat ceiling, but the floor was also like 6 inches of built up wood ply, and the top couple layers were cross hatched so they could pour sand in there.
I love that.
And then put radiant PEX tubing down, and the radiant PEX would heat up the sand, which would act as mass, and then they would nail on a hardwood floor on top of that so that you could have a heated hardwood floor. But when you looked up, you saw wood. When you looked down, you saw wood. There was no other material but wood visible in the building. And there was no insulation except for the thickness of wood, which I was like, wait a minute, this is like a airtight log cabin. And they're like, yeah, kind of like what you crazy Americans have been building for a couple hundred years. You're like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But they were doing it in a different way, and it was literally the most beautiful building.
If you get on YouTube to go look at that, if you find it, there's an Easter egg in there. You will see Mr. Matt Reisinger and myself in our boxers.
That's right. That was a picture. That was at the Bow Show.
At the Bow Show. We're at this conference. It's the biggest build show in the world. And Matt and I... It was Joey's idea, and why we did, I have no idea.
It's going to be on the YouTube forever. If you want to see me with
the CrossFit body from about 5 years ago, go scrub the videos. You'll find
what was the name of that penguin logo company?
I don't know. They need to sponsor us.
They do need to. It was, if you give me a second, I'll think about it. They were a sponsor at JLC Live, weren't they? Didn't they have their logos on at JLC Live this year?
Maybe
I think they did. I can't think of it. It was like a penguin-like look. Anyways, that was... The Bow Show blew us away too.
Yeah.
But we have a series of videos. You can go check that out from like 16 or 17 of Jordan and I and Joey bebopping around Europe, seeing cool projects. Jordan, I'm absolutely thrilled to have you back on the Build Show, dude.
Here. Thank you so much for
my
having
hope
me
is
back.
that your phone's going to ring off the hook with Reisinger Rejects.
Right, the Reisinger Rejects.
Everyone to be reminded.
If you think Reisinger is too cool for you, he probably is. And you should call smithhousecode.com, smithhousecode.com.
And go follow him at Jordan Smith Builds. Jordan's an amazing man. I'm so thankful to have you back on the Build Show, guys. Go check out his stuff. In the meantime, hit that subscribe button. You know we've got new podcasts every single Friday. Follow us on Facebook or Instagram. Otherwise, we'll see you next time on the Build Show podcast.